Hi, I'm Richard McKenzie, Professor of Economics and Management in the Mirage School of Business at the University of California, Irvine. Anyone who exudes confidence that the federal government's bailout of the financial sector will work is either smoking something, blowing smoke, or both. When Secretary of the Treasury Henry Paulson and Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke first proposed the $700 billion bailout, I grudgingly set aside my free market proclivities, held my nose, and leaned in favor of the bailout. Now we have the political record of how the bailout was driven through Congress recklessly, through buyouts of members. The bailout proposal quickly became a political Christmas tree, covered with bailout ornaments, tax cuts, and a variety of bailouts for other past bad credit decisions. For example, there's $25 billion for bad car loans, all designed to achieve the requisite number of votes in Congress. The bailout bill as passed must now exceed $1 trillion, and no one should be surprised if the total bailout for all sectors will eventually exceed $2 trillion or even $3 trillion as bailout ornaments continue to be hung. There now appears to be truly no natural or political limit to the expansions of the bailout bubble. Certainly, other sectors of the economy can make the case that their bad financial decisions of the past have been no worse and no less deserving of political attention than those of the financial sector. Other non-financial sectors of the economy with toxic assets on their books can now claim that they will face the added financial distress that the financial sector's bailout will cause as more of the country's financial and real resources are diverted to propping up the wayward financial sector. I understand the urgency in the case for the original bailout proposal. There was a threat of the economy being throttled because of growing fears of panic thinking, taking hold with the possible run on banks and money market funds. Now, however, we have to worry that bailout mania will set in with every interest group bellying up to the government trough in Washington with cups in hand. Surely at some point the solution can become a bigger mess than the original problem. And at this writing, I've lost almost all hope that the prospective drain on the economy from the burgeoning bailout monster in our midst will be held in check. The fact of the matter is that the bailout solution has been greatly oversold with all the talk of dire consequences if the government doesn't open a main fiscal pipeline gushing into Wall Street with branches to the country's main streets. The fact of the matter is that the proponents of the bailout really can't be confident that the bailout will work as advertised, or even that the bailout will not make the country's economic problems worse, which no one has even hinted at. How can that be? Consider several missed points in the bailout debate. First, the hundreds of billions of bailout dollars that will be used to buy the toxic mortgage-backed securities that banks now hold will not emerge from some magic lantern in Washington. The bailout billions will be borrowed, adding to the federal deficit and the national debt. The billions will flow into the banks and add to the banks' financial wherewithal to make loans. However, those billions will come from government bond buyers, which means that the bailout billions will soak up credit that would otherwise be available in the financial sector. There might be no net positive effect on the financial sector and the broader economy, but no one really knows how big that net effect will be. And the net effect could be very small, if not non-existent. If the bailouts are extended broadly to non-financial sectors and all homeowners, the net benefits for the financial sector could be negative because the financial sector would have to shoulder its share of the burden that will come with helping the non-financial sectors and homeowners. All depends on how large the bailout monster in our midst becomes, and our democratic shackles do not, at this writing, appear very strong. Second, all the talk about the dire need for a bailout for the financial sector that has been portrayed as teetering on the brink of collapse could have encouraged the very panic thinking that is at the foundation of the current financial crisis, elevating the need for the bailout. For all we know, the world stock markets could have been crashing recently, partly because of the dire bailout talk, with the passage of the bailout bill actually increasing the number of investors who have gone into full panic or sell mode. Third, when many investors on Wall Street and ordinary people on Main Street come to their senses and reflect for a moment about the consequences of adding an additional $1, $2, or $3 trillion to the national debt, they might see in that debt the strong likelihood of a long-term increase in their taxes and a decrease in their favored government programs. Moreover, the moral hazard the country will face in the future because of the current bailout are real and non-trivial, and those future problems can be captured in people's current expectations about the future health of the country, thus undercutting the country's economic vitality today and worsening today's financial mess. Be assured that the bailout will not be the proverbial free lunch, as suggested by bailout advocates, and this future burden can throttle current economic incentives and thus the economic recovery in the short term. I understand that bailout proponents have advocated the bailout on the grounds that the government can buy up banks' toxic assets at depressed prices and sell them later for a handsome profit, up to $2.3 trillion according to one report, when market stability has returned. But don't bank on the profit. The Congress and the administration will not likely forego the chance to dissipate any emerging profit in ways that will often be foolish and detrimental to the economy. If the potential profit was as clear as the bailout advocates suggest, you can bet I would have no reservation in supporting the bailout. But the touted profit is immersed in rhetorical fog, a sense of urgency that can easily be overblown. There is also the concern that banks will not sell their assets for anything close to fire sale prices, because they would then have to mark their other assets to markets, giving rise to book losses and a reduction in the bank's credit ratings, which can further undermine their position in financial markets. But then one of the reasons the country's credit markets may have choked up is that the banks are now holding on to the sale of their assets in anticipation of getting better deals later this year from the Treasury, which now has very deep pockets and not a whole lot of incentive to weigh taxpayer interests on par with the interests of Wall Street bankers who, through the bailout, will be in a better position to lobby Congress and the administration for favorable prices for what could be worthless assets. And don't be surprised if banks' toxic assets that government buys are the most toxic of the toxic assets, which adds to the dubious claim that the bank's toxic assets represent highly profitable investments that the likes of Warren Buffett and the sheiks of Abu Dhabi have overlooked. And then there is the issue of falling housing prices that, by all accounts, during the housing boom got way out of line with people's ability to pay because of bubble thinking. Bailout advocates have argued that the bailouts are necessary to stop the fall in the price of houses, if not boost their prices, in order to stop the free fall in the foreclosures and the market value of the mortgage-backed securities, which supposedly can avert bank failures. But then, how can housing prices get back in reasonable line with their historic trend without falling? Any proposal to prop up out-of-line housing prices is likely to do nothing more than postpone economic problems, and very likely to make them worse, especially since such a policy course will encourage people and banks to make bad pricing and credit decisions for decades to come. Advocates also lament the frozen credit markets, but tighter credit simply means that lenders have increased their credit standards and the interest rates that they charge, which can be seen as prudent adjustments when credit standards, according even to bailout proponents, have been way too lenient and a source of the current financial crisis. Nevertheless, the bailout advocates seem convinced that the solution to the financial crisis is to prevent financial institutions from serving the credit unworthy. I know much of what I have written has an element of ivory tower theorizing, maybe bordering on speculation, but is that not also true of the thinking behind the advocacy of the bailout, which to date has been unchecked? Finally, I hope my pessimism turns out to be as unwarranted as the confidence that bailout advocates now exude for the policy course the country has taken. Thank you for listening to me.